that, I will call to order the regular meeting of council for Tuesday, November the 17th. Just before we go into agenda approval and all, Ms. O'Brien, you have the podium.
Mayor, members of council, I'm very pleased to announce that we've hired a new manager of community social development. So Lisa Brown brings 15 years of experience to the town of Canmore. She has worked in nonprofit and government roles. Most recently, she was the policy analyst and acting director with the province of Alberta's Prevention of Family Violence and Homeless Support Division in Human Services. And Lisa offers us expertise in policy, procedure development, project management, strategic planning, contract management, negotiations, fund development, and outcome management. So we'd like to give a warm welcome to Lisa and maybe give her an opportunity to have a few words with council.
You bet. Welcome to council chambers, Ms. Brown, and welcome to the town of Canmore.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, you've got another Lisa that I'm going to have. Yeah. So I'll have to be very careful I don't send those uber confidential emails I'm always sending to the CEO, but welcome to Canmore.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm excited to start here, so thank you.
Great. There's a few changes to the agenda I'm going to suggest, one of which is to add item G4 has to be added, doesn't it? Calgary Regional Partnership after in-camera. And item G5 also after the in-camera, and that's Dead Man's Flat Area Structure Plan Mediation. So those are both items that will be brought forward out of in-camera. And we'll add two items to in-camera, one being item K1. We'll make this new item K1, Calgary Regional Partnership. And item K2 then will be DMF, the Dead Man's Flat Area Structure Plan Mediation. Then item K3 will be Land Use Matter, and item K4, also in camera, will be a legal matter. But we will come out of in camera after items K1 and K2 to entertain a couple of motions and then go back in camera for the other two items. Everybody understand that? Ms. Hyde, did you understand that? Perfect. So I'll move the agenda be adopted as amended. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. There are no... Ms. DeSoto?
My apologies, Mayor Borrowman. I believe you skipped over public question period.
I sure did. And that wasn't intentional. Mr. Kernick? Are there any members of the public that wish to ask questions at this time? It's funny how I often do skip over public question period. I don't know. Are there any members of yada yada? Seeing none, we'll move on then to approval of minutes. Looking at the minutes of the October 26, 2015 annual organizational meeting of council, are there errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll move the minutes be adopted as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Looking at the minutes of the November 3rd regular meeting of council, are there errors or omissions on those minutes? Seeing none, I'll move they be adopted as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Going down to item F1. Bylaw 2015-17, an amendment to Bylaw 01203, the Spring Creek Mountain Village ARP, and to Bylaw 22-2010, the Land Use Bylaw. Mr. Sorpley. Oh, and Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be excusing myself from this discussion for conflict of interest.
Okay.
Thank you, Worship, members of council. I want to start off my presentation just by making a correction. I misspoke at the public hearing for this bylaw. There were 2 public hearings that night, one for the Canmore Hotel, one for this bylaw. I had stated that letters were sent out to adjacent property owners. Letters were not sent out to adjacent property owners. However, in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, the scope of this land use change does not require letters to be sent out. So I just wanted to make that correction so that you're fully informed. So notification was still consistent with the Municipal Government Act, but the letters weren't sent out. This is bylaw 2015-17. I'm going to give you a brief overview. You've seen this before. This is an amendment to the Spring Creek Mountain Village Area Redevelopment Plan and to the SCMVDC district. The main amendments are building height, streetscape and signs, and connections between buildings. Some additional changes have been made in the version that's being presented for second reading, and I'll go through those as part of my presentation. In response to the information heard at the public hearing, the proponent asked that we change the height zones that were originally proposed. This area in shaded gray was originally proposed to be area B in terms of height. Area C in terms of height, and that would have been 12 meters. The change here is to change it to area D, which is 9.5 meters, but to add the ability to have a lower pitched roof, and I'll explain that in a moment. So essentially the major changes are the area to the north is going from D to C, the area in the middle going from zone B to zone A, and then this area to the south going from D to, we'll say, D star, essentially allowing a lower pitched roof. The intent there is to allow that small gray area to have a minimum 212 pitched roof, where elsewhere in the district an 812 roof is required. This graphic kind of shows what that difference means. So in terms of protecting mountain views, there's a little bit less absolute height, but as you can see, there's almost equivalent building mass where you look at where the eave line is. So 12 meters, the previous proposal, and an 812 roof pitch would have your mass height here, but the building volume is effectively down to the eave line. By doing the building at 9.5 meters with a 212 roof, there's more visible sky, but an equivalent building mass, and the proponents believe they can build the conference center they're hoping to build within that volume. The pink building to the right on both slides, the pink building, light pink, shows what area D is in the other areas, so where it has an 812 roof pitch minimum. And I'll just go back for a moment. So this area is light pink, this area is fuchsia. Fuchsia. Same color as my shirt. Yes. So that's one of the major changes, and that was in response to comments heard at the public hearing. Seen this graphic before. This is part of the application package. The purple line, this is the highest portion of the building in this area A. So the purple line shows existing maximum height at 14 meters. The yellow line shows proposed maximum height of that area at 16 meters. And then the orange line is roughly the maximum that some portions of the building can reach. There's a clause in the bylaw to allow up to, let me get this correct, the clause is to allow up to 5% of the building to exceed the maximum height by 20%. So that's what that orange line represents. So some areas of the building, up to 5% of that roof line could go to that height. Other changes from first reading, and these were comments that were made by administration at first reading. So building articulation is now specified. It previously wasn't. So a minimum of 25% of the facade of the building would be required to articulate off property line, and that articulation would be between 0.3 meters or 1 foot and 3 meters. Also, as was stated in the sustainability screening report, the intent was to provide covered bike parking. That wasn't originally included in the district. In the version being presented to you tonight, it is, and that's shown in the red line version. The other change is a change to development authority. The original development authority would have council approving any variances and Planning Commission dealing with effectively everything else. It was felt by administration that sending a sign application or a change of use from one retail shop to an office wasn't a fruitful use of time for CPC. So the change proposed is for council to deal with any height variances beyond those expressly permitted in the bylaw, Planning Commission to deal with effectively any new building, so anything over 500 square meters, and the development officer to deal with everything else, so a new sign if the business changes and whatnot. Those are the changes to the bylaw from first reading. Other observations, the proposed amendments may facilitate an increase in commercial assessment, which is consistent with the MDP goal of increasing commercial assessment within the community. The provision of visitor accommodation and a potential conference facility, particularly in such close proximity to downtown, appear to be consistent with Goal 1B of the business plan. And also, Spring Creek Mountain Village did do a infracycle analysis. So that's the impact on the municipal bottom line over a period of 20 years. They did that previously, and the Spring Creek Mountain Village, it shows as a positive impact on municipal finances. The anticipation of this increasing commercial assessment, while the model hasn't been rerun, that would only improve the scenario. It wouldn't reduce it. And with that, the administration is recommending that council provide second and third reading to bylaw 2015-17. If there are any questions, I'll try and answer them.
So are there any questions of members of council at this time? Councillor Comfort?
I have some questions, but who is the development officer? Okay.
The development officer is a role that is delegated to the CAO, who then sub-delegates it. So myself, Ms. Van Frossen, Ms. Rissling-Wynn, we're all development officers.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Krauser?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for the presentation, and I don't have any substantive question other than just offer a couple of quick editorials.
Sure.
And that's just under the Development Authority section, 3.19.8.2. I think it's the Development Authority for new commercial buildings.
Yep.
And then just in that the next section, just capitalization of Development Authority and Development Officer. I had made those at another point, but they didn't make it through. So, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Sorfleet. With that, then I'll move that council provide second reading to bylaw 2015-17 as amended. Discussion on the motion. I'll speak briefly to the motion. I will support the motion, and I was happy to see the developer suggest some amendments in response to what was heard at the public hearing. The not massive changes. There's still going to be an impact, visual impact to the surrounding neighborhood, but all things considered, I thought that was a reasonable response to what we heard. Certainly the conference center and the visitor accommodation that we will see coming out of this will be good for our economy, and the location is it's hard to beat for that kind of business, so happy to support the motion. Any other comments, discussion from council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. I'll then move the council provide third reading to bylaw 2015-17 as amended. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Moving on to item F2. The Environmental Advisory Review Committee Terms of Reference. All right, we'll wait for Okay, welcome back, Councilor McCallum. And with that, we will turn to item F2. Ms. Reisling-Wind.
Good evening, Mayor Bowman and members of Council. I'm here this evening to speak to you in regards to Council Motion 254-2014, where Council requested that the Environmental Advisory Review Committee recommend changes to their mandate. So in response to that, ERC did indeed review the mandate, and we also reviewed the core functions that are part of the terms of reference that went along with the mandate as well. So in doing that, the existing mandate, the committee felt adequately and accurately described the intent of the committee, and therefore no changes are currently being made to the mandate itself. Similarly, no changes to the committee membership are deemed necessary at this point in time either. Awesome. ERC, as I mentioned, also reviewed the core functions of the mandate, and in response to that, they would like to make the following recommendation to add the following language. That the committee provide advice on the Town of Canmore's Environmental Sustainability Action Plan, or ESAP, and any updated or related plans, and support the execution of initiatives related to ESAP. So the reason for that is because when not tasked with reviewing other related items in the core functions such as environmental impact statements and assessments, the committee discussions have largely been focused on ESAP and initiatives related to the ESAP. These activities are not currently included in the core functions, and the committee felt that they should be added. With this addition, the committee can further support the town's business planning related to the ESAP initiatives, and also know that these discussions, in turn, are supported through the adoption of the terms of reference. So thus ensuring that the business planning is in alignment with the ESAP, which is also in alignment with the activities of ERC. So the recommendation, which also includes a little bit of housekeeping, is that Council give first, second, and third reading to Bylaw 2015-22, and that Council also rescind Policy 227-2005 because it's now embedded as Schedule A in the new bylaw. Questions?
Thank you very much. Are there any questions at this time from members of Council? Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question. With the wording of that ERC give advice, are we required to ask for advice, or are this is just they're there to be the good helper, big brother type thing?
So within the core functions, Council can ask for ERC's advice already. This enables the committee to actually feel comfortable having those ESAP discussions and knowing that it's supported by Council through the amended terms of reference.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. That I'll move the Council give first reading to Bylaw 2015-22. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, we'll call the question. Those in favour? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. I'll move the Council give second reading to Bylaw 2015-22. For discussion, seeing none, call the question. Those in favour? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Weekly from Council to give third reading to Bylaw 2015-22. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And I then will move the Council give third reading to Bylaw 2015-22. Discussion on that motion. Seeing none, call the question. Those in favour? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And I'll move the Council rescind Policy 227-2005. Discussion on that motion. Seeing none, call the question. Those in favour? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. There you go. Easy peasy. Turning to item G1, property tax relief for Cougar Creek flood impacted houses. Ms. Staple.
Oh, it's up there. She's awesome, eh? Ahead of the game.
Oh, good evening, Mayor Bourbon, members of council. I'm before you tonight asking for approval of this recommendation for tax relief as presented for property owners on Cougar Creek, such as the total 2015 property taxes payable be forgiven a total of $1,892.36. This amount represents the property taxes as calculated on the annual tax notice and based on the assessed land value only, as this home has been demolished. As part of the grant application, this resolution of council is required in order to receive the eligible funding. I do believe this is to be the last year the property tax relief is offered by the Southern Alberta Flood Response Program. This program was initiated August 30th, 2013. The program overview is that property tax relief funding under the Southern Alberta Flood Response Program is available to offset lost revenues resulting from council deciding to forgive property tax for property owners who have lost the use of their homes, provided the property qualifies under the program eligibility criteria. One other property previously granted this refund is not part of this request, as the provincial grant administrator has indicated that it would no longer qualify. Previous tax relief approved by council and funding received in 2013 was $27,775 for 13 properties, and in 2014, $9,893, representing 7 properties. Given that council has previously provided property tax relief to the above property owners, and a grant is available to cover all amounts cancelled or refunded on this qualifying property, administration is recommending that council consider tax relief for this one property. And that's all I have tonight, sir.
Thank you. I just have one question, and it's regarding, so this is specific to the one property that had the house demolished.
Pardon me? Yes.
Yeah. And there's a neighboring property that has been in a state of disrepair and uninhabitable. So,
as I understand it, there is some kind of ongoing appeal with the provincial program and the owners of this property. And the grant administrator felt that it wouldn't qualify. This one that I am applying for, we know for sure we will receive the funding. At any time, a council may, at its discretion, cancel or refund all or portion of a tax. However, in that case, there would be no grant available for that refund, and it would.
Okay. So when we first started this tax relief program at the town of Canmore, was before the province had announced their grant policy, isn't it?
Early after the flood occurred, council did approve just the municipal portion of the tax refund, and then in August, when the provincial program came into play, based on people that were still out of their homes at December 31st, that's what the 2013 application represented. And so there were some properties that did have occupancy, and it was between the cutoff time and December 31st. So they would have been given a day refund, and that's what our 2013 application noted. And then on the 2014, same thing applied. As homes were granted occupancy, the amount of the tax refund was prorated.
So I had always assumed that the house that's still not reoccupied was benefiting from the tax relief, but...
And it was. I don't know the details of the current situation.
Okay.
Just based on my discussions with the provincial grant administrator, he felt that it would no longer apply. It would no longer be approved.
Would there then be an opportunity at some point for council to discuss some tax relief for that property, recognizing it would only be the municipal portion, or?
Certainly. We can certainly come back with that document if you wish.
Yeah, I don't want to try and make that up on the fly tonight, but nor will I make it the part of the motion, but it might be something we can talk about. Are there other questions at this time? Councillor Krausert. Councillor Krausert.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Staple, for the presentation. I actually turned off my button because you had asked the question, but I just wanted to clarify then, if council didn't make some sort of motion with regards to the house that is still to be taken down or is still damaged, it would be open for the owner to make an application for tax relief.
I
Would it
believe
not?
so. At any time, anyone can actually make that application.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Are there other questions this time from Ms. Staple? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then I will move council approve tax relief as presented for property owners on Cougar Creek, such that the total daily education property tax requisition, municipal property tax, perpetually affordable housing requisition, and senior requisition payable will be forgiven for each day the house remained in an uninhabitable state beyond December 31st, 2013 for the 2015 tax year. Discussion on that motion? If none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Whew, we are moving. Turning then to item G2. Sure. G2, Recreation Services Operating Policy. Mr. Yunker. If you want to just dawdle on your way up, Councillor Croucher will be back in momentarily. He's a good dawdler, isn't he?
One of my specials. Don't mind me, I'm just dawdling.
Councillor Croucher, it's a quick study. He can catch up with us.
All right, Your Worship, members of council, first I have to say I was at the dentist today, so I'm still a little frozen, so...
Got a little drool here.
Yeah. If it gets too disgusting, just give me a wave. On September 1st, you received the report card on Elevation Place and heard of the success of the enterprise operating model. You were also presented with the first draft of a policy to extend the enterprise operating model to the entirety of recreation services, facilities, programs, and services. You reviewed that policy and found it wanting. You asked us to better define what a business approach with a community conscience actually means. We reconsidered this policy from two specific points of view. The business community and how this policy might more appropriately serve or at least acknowledge and respect our private sector partners, and the economically vulnerable and how this policy might improve accessibility and encourage inclusiveness. We met with representatives of the private sector, bricks and mortar health and wellness businesses on two occasions, exchanged a number of iterations and various wordings. And while we were unable to recommend all of the wording that they had requested, and I detailed this in the request for decision, we reached an understanding on wording which they were able to endorse. And see Ron Rempel here this evening, he was part of that process, and I'm sure would be happy to speak to that. We also met with our associates in community social development, and so they gave us a bit of input. And that added to ongoing discussions we've been engaged in with them for some time in looking at ways to increase access to recreation facilities and programs. And we hope to be coming back to council at some point in the near future with some ideas as to how we can do that. So what we ended up doing with the policy is basically changing our 4 key principles, which you would have seen before, and adding the 5th key principle. And that is operating with a business approach, with a community conscience. And within that, we defined, I guess, that key principle by identifying 9 components of it. And those 9 components include customer service. An exceptional service has been a hallmark of the enterprise model, but the customers also include our partners, the private sector people that we're working with, our not-for-profit sport groups and recreation groups. And so we're really looking at extending that to the people we work with to deliver programs and services to the community. Access and affordability, developing accessible programs and services with other agencies, and delivering in a respectful and inclusive manner. I've referenced in here the current sort of 4-tiered accessibility program that we have with Campership, Jumpstart, Kids Sport, and our Fee Assistance Program, and that's where we've been working with social development on expanding those opportunities. Fiscal responsibility and accountability, another cornerstone, and using the cost recovery pyramid that's in our recreation user fee rental rate policy. We want to be transparent in how we do that, projecting pricing over a long period of time. So that gives certainty to, again, our not-for-profit groups that are using our facilities. It also gives certainty, or more certainty, to the private sector as to where we're going. So that's another aspect. And collaborating with stakeholders to maximize service delivery while being fiscally responsible, and that's basically to the taxpayers. We want to maximize community assets and facilities, and using cooperation as opposed to competition to maximize the use of recreation assets to meet the aspirations while ensuring access and affordability. Marketing and sales, we will continue to take a business approach to marketing and sales while looking for ways to collaborate with not-for-profit sport groups and private operators. A small example, next week we have a meeting working with Canmore Business and Tourism on Canmore's first Canmore Health and Wellness Festival that will combine public and private sector operators. Maximize economic benefit, and in that we look at leveraging assets to generate economic benefit. Another example of our relationship with Canmore Business and Tourism, the ATV Alberta Cup that ran last spring is estimated to have generated over $500,000 worth of economic impact in a slow time in the town. And we're working with them, obviously now with the Edmonton Oilers coming in, the ATV Alberta Cup coming back this spring, and on some of the smaller tournaments and competitions that run through our not-for-profit sport groups in the town. They've set up associations with Canmore Minor Hockey, gymnastics, etc., looking at ways that they can make their competitions more profitable and to steer business activity, I guess, to businesses in the town. Best practices, operating within best practices, introducing residents to sport and fitness, and respecting the role of our other partners. So in many cases, recreation will introduce people to fitness, to yoga, to a variety of activities, but as they develop their skills and want more, that's where our private sector partners are doing a good job and fill that part of the model. And certainly we've seen, since Elevation Place opened as an example, the improvement that the private sector has made. So some competition is healthy, and we've seen major improvements in the operations and the equipment of many of the private sector operators. And developing and supporting staff and volunteers, developing motivated and highly trained staff and volunteers, and then sharing those training opportunities with our partners. We've done that over the past couple of years when we're bringing in certification programs, inviting the private sector to participate, also developing coaching opportunities and coaching development opportunities for the not-for-profit sector, our sport groups, etc., and working with our sport groups to develop their officials. We've now run, for 2 years now, it worked with developing referees. Last year we ran a major session for soccer referees, and I met with baseball today, and we're going to do one in the spring for umpires as well. And that really reduces the cost of providing those officials to those groups and brings the course into Canmore where it's more accessible. And innovation, partnerships, and alignment. We want to continue to encourage innovation and partnerships with our various opportunities, operating in alignment with the recreation services continuum. And this is actually the fitness continuum, which I think you've seen before. So this is one aspect. There are 3 continuum that make up the overall recreation services continuum. But in here you can see the orange lines are basically where the private sector operates and the scope of services they offer. The light blue is recreation services registered programs, and the dark blue is our core classes, which are included with membership at Elevation Place. The green on this diagram is actually our not-for-profit sector. So that's the Canmore Minor Soccer, the Nordic Ski Club, etc. So by following this and updating this on an annual basis, again, we're going to give more certainty to the different players as to what our role is, what their roles are, and a more solid plan. So this is something that we will review on an annual basis and report back to Council. So the vision remains the same as you saw before. Recreation services enriches the community through the provision of high-quality sports, fitness, creative, and educational opportunities. The mission: provide connections to the places, programs, and people to inspire creative, healthy, and active living. Encourage participation by operating within an inclusive, sustainable business model founded on service excellence and community conscience. And I now invite your questions and comments. We're proposing here that we delete the actual attachments from this policy because they will change on an annual basis, and we didn't think it would be appropriate to have those have to come back to Council. So they're as a reference for this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one or two small questions regarding terms in the policy under 4.3D. It talks about the target to recover a minimum 60% of the cost directly attributable to its operations. I'm just wondering if you have any sort of a definition of what you mean by directly attributable.
Yeah, so those are the costs that our finance department reports, the facilities department. There'll be a separate report for Canmore Rec Center and Elevation Place. So that would be combining those with the recreation services, revenues and expenses, and separating out our facility rentals and attaching that to the Canmore Rec Center as opposed to Elevation Place, because the vast bulk of the revenue there is attributable to the rec center. So that gives us, I guess, the most easily accessible and something we can look at on a regular basis. It doesn't necessarily include overhead costs, etc., but it's I think consistent with what was in the HSG 2012 business plan and is what we've been reporting to Council.
Right. Great. So, and the I understand it's simply too difficult to try to pull in the indirect costs such as communications and finance and HR.
Yeah, and then likely that threshold would decline a little bit. So as long as we're measuring the same
Sure.
in going forward, then it's a reasonable metric, I think.
Great. And so will Council be able to expect an annual reporting on how we're doing in regards to meeting our targets?
Absolutely. It's something we monitor on a regular basis. We're now doing quarterly meetings with the facilities team where we look at these, and I hope we'll get to the point in the near future we actually build our budgets together.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Crosby?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Yonker, for your presentation. I first must apologize. I did not mean any disrespect by going out at the beginning of your presentation. I had to deal with a family matter, so I apologize for that. Secondly, I just wanted to thank you for coming back in response to the postponement with a really multifaceted, fulsome look at what community conscience. You took a look at it from several different angles, and it all shows here, and it's really appreciated. And I guess my only last comment is I think that with that continuum being developed and this sort of work and the work that's done with the bricks and mortar, I believe that recreation in this town has gone to a new level, and so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion regarding this at this time? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then I will move that the council approve the recreation services operating policy as attached, with the amendment that attachments 1 and 2 are deleted. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. That will bring us to item G3, the Canmore Community Housing Corporation loan request. Van K. Hey, she said I could call her Van K. That's what I'm doing.
Catherine works too. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. I'm before you this evening to recommend that council provide a loan to Canmore Community Housing Corporation, to which I'll refer to as CCHC from this point forward. As council knows, there's been a number of ways that we've supported the Affordable Housing 48 PAH rental unit construction project up at 100 Durgis Lane, now referred to as MacArthur Place. Council has provided funds from the PAH reserve. Council has also provided loan guarantees during the construction period for the mortgage funds coming from Bow Valley Credit Union. Unanticipated costs. When the project was developed, it was developed for 2 phases, and the idea was that phase 1 would be done, and then phase 2 would be undertaken. At the time that the bids came in, there was a price availability to proceed with phase 2, so that happened. After the fact, it was determined that site works, most specifically drainage issues, would cause phase 2 to drain onto phase 1, which caused need for modification of construction on phase 1. Therefore, the costs have increased over what the original budget was. As there's not my understanding is there's not an availability to increase the mortgage amount. Therefore, CCHC is requesting interest-bearing loan. They just asked for a loan. I'm saying we should charge them some interest. They would like a loan of not more than $600,000 to fund these extra costs. As administration, normally on our investments right now, we're earning about 2% compound interest on our investments. In order to fund a $600,000 ask, it's likely we would have to cash in some of those investments in order to actually have the dollars to give to CCHC, which means we'd be foregoing that interest. In discussions with CCHC, I had sort of recommended that administration's recommendation to council would be to charge simple interest. So with an investment, compound interest, you reinvest the 2% interest you get, so then you get interest on your interest. What I'm recommending for charging for CCHC, sort of as a compromise between the interest that we wouldn't be earning on our investments, but also still supporting affordable housing for Canmore, is to just charge 2% simple interest, so 2% per year, not charging interest on the interest. So on $600,000 for a 5-year period, because it's my understanding that within 5 years CCHC plans to repay the $600,000 with the interest that had accumulated. So no payments would happen each year over the 5 years. It would just be a lump sum payment at the end of the 5 years. My understanding is their plan to roll that into their mortgage funds because their mortgage has a 5-year renewal term. So at that time, that's where they're planning to get the funds, is my understanding. So if we were to provide a $600,000 loan, the interest for that 5-year period of time at 2% simple interest would be $60,000. The amount of interest that we would be foregoing at a 2% compound interest rate is $63,000. So the net difference over a 5-year period is $3,000. Just of note, attached to your request for decision report is the formal letter requesting the loan funds, as well as an amended construction budget for Phase 1 and Phase 2. Council may note the amended construction budget is just over $10 million now. That concludes my report, but I would welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Just on that, the suggestion, recommendation for the 2% simple interest, I'm certain you've talked with CCHC and that's within their ability to incorporate that into their future payout plan.
When this first arose, Jennifer Bisley was the director at the time, and I did discuss that with her. Subsequent, I have had discussions with the chairman of the board, and I have not received any feedback that would not be doable.
I'll take that as a yes then.
My roundabout way, yeah.
Great. Are there questions from the members of council?
Just another question, just to answer your question, Your Worship, that our construction administrator has met with the bank, and the bank has indicated that they don't see any issue with rolling that owing amount into the overall loan at year 5.
Okay, thank you. And just to be clear, or help clarify the discussion for myself, it seems that in fact what we're learning is the original budget should have been in this level, and the additional monies that came in were really a direct result of how the project was phased in and the new information that came with the application for Phase 2.
I think it isn't necessarily because it's phased in. I think it was something that would have come to light when Phase 2 was constructed anyway, which may have caused it to be even more costly because you would have had to go and redo the configuration and the site work for Phase 1. I think actually it's a good thing we went ahead with Phase 2 so that we recognized that there were these drainage issues and we could address them right from the beginning, and that's what caused the incurrence of extra costs.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions at this time? Councillor Stanford?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Van Kampen, for your presentation. If we do a loan, that does affect our debt ceiling, is that correct?
No, we're not taking a loan. We're providing a loan. So therefore, it doesn't affect our debt limit. Our debt limit refers to money we borrow.
Okay.
In this case, we're lending.
So this doesn't affect our debt limits?
It just affects our cash flow.
So it's just the cash flow. Why wouldn't we go for the full recovery on the compound interest? And it wouldn't end up costing us any money.
It would cost, it wouldn't cost us any money. However, I was trying to be cognizant that affordable housing is a priority of council, and so felt that perhaps recommending sort of a compromise position might be the way to go.
So this compromise would cost us $3,000?
Correct.
Foregoing the interest on 2%?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you mention that initially there hadn't been, that the original ask from CCHC was no interest, or no? I was always expected to pay some interest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are there other questions at this time? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Van Kampen. With that, I will then move the council loan to the Canmore Community Housing Corporation an amount not to exceed $600,000 for the purposes of funding unanticipated costs for construction of 48 PAH rental unit at 100 Durgis Lane with the following terms: simple interest of 2% per annum will accrue. The repayment of the principal and all interest is due 5 years from the date of the loan, and annual payments are not required. Speaking to the motion, Councillor Krausert.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm pleased to support this motion. I think that it's a good solution to these anticipated costs, and I'm excited about these new units coming online in 2016. I think it's going to have an impact on our housing situation, and I'm very pleased that we're able to do this to allow that project to keep going without incurring a delay while seeking some other form of financing. And I should add that it's also backed up, as noted in the letter from CCHC, that the appraised value is expected to be in excess of $12 million. So our build cost is definitely covered by the asset.
Councillor Krausert. I'll support the motion as well, and while big picture, it's disappointing that this occurred, but as I see it, this was the true cost of building those 48 units, and I note that the square footage cost is still within our supported target, $250 square foot, essentially. Right, you are. Exactly. Thank you. So, in any case, with that correction, I'm happy to support the motion to provide a $600,000 loan. Is there other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favour? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Oh, look at that, 6 o'clock. That I will move the council go in camera. Those in favour? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And we will come out of in camera for a couple of motions carried unanimously. Okay, we're back in public meeting. Perhaps Tanya's watching. And Coco. Okay, we can focus on council now. So there's one item regarding the Calgary Regional Partnership, which we're been voluntary members of for a number of years, because of the intent of the provincial government to mandate a growth management board in place of the current format of Calgary Regional Partnership. And then also, as a result of conversations I've been a part of with the Minister of Municipal Affairs, who indicated that when the province mandates a growth management board, they wouldn't necessarily mandate in some of the outlying existing partners like Canmore. So, in view of the amount of work that would be entailed in getting from where we are today to where the provincial government would like to see CRP, number of man hours and staff resources required, I'm going to recommend that the town of Canmore withdraw from membership of the Calgary Regional Partnership. And before I put the motion on the table, is there any discussion around that? In that case, I'll move the council direct administration to provide notice to the Calgary Regional Partnership of its intent to withdraw its membership from the CRP effective April 1st, 2016. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favour? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Ms. DeSoto. Presentation or discussion on the Dead Man's Flat Area Structure Plan.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Members of Council, as Council's aware, we received a letter from the MD of Bighorn advising us of their decision with respect to the Dead Man's Flat Area Structure Plan. Specifically, that they have proceeded to give their bylaw for the area structure plan 3 readings, despite the fact that the town has requested formal mediation of that and advised that should they pass that bylaw, we would consider that it was detrimental to a number of initiatives the town had spent years involved in planning for functional wildlife corridors. And so just to highlight a few items that I believe are erroneously stated in the MD's letter for the record. The MD indicates in their first sentence, second, it is noted that the town's request to mediate was indirectly provided as part of the July 22nd public hearing. Not sure how they've given that interpretation. The letter was emailed to them, sent to them, and then read into the record by Mayor Borrowman at the area or the public hearing. And specifically, the second last paragraph of our letter indicated we hereby give notice of our concerns for the requirements of Section 690 of the Municipal Government Act. In accordance with this section, we are expressing our desire to engage in formal mediation and to resolve this matter. Should the MD opt not to mediate and move to approve this ASP, we advise it is our intent to file an appeal of the matter to the MGB. Further, at the front of the letter, I highlighted a concern that the MD noted they were somewhat confused over the preciseness of the issue the town wanted to mediate. They failed to acknowledge in their letter that we held an intermunicipal meeting with them, with the only agenda item, that being what it was to mediate. We had lengthy conversations and presented them with this copy of the statement, what we wanted to mediate, and that was on August 20th, 2015, so that we sought to mediate a solution whereby the lands on the north side of the Trans-Canada Highway wildlife underpass in the hamlet of Dead Man's Flats are protected and left in an undeveloped state such that the integrity of the wildlife corridor network is maintained and large mammals are able to navigate effectively and safely around our two communities. So that was essentially the detrimental effect that we felt if the area structure plan was approved and implemented, that those functionality of those corridors could not be realized. And we had spent considerable time and effort over the last several decades trying to ensure those corridors' functionality. Also in the MD's letter, they highlight a technical memorandum which I shared with Council at the Committee of the Whole last week. Specifically, Golder Associates responded to the Town of Canmore's concerns addressed at their public hearing regarding the functionality of that corridor. And it's the MD's belief that this technical memorandum would allay all of the town's concerns with regards to that development. However, as just discussed with Council, it's clear that that Council is not satisfied with this report from the MD consultant, and feels that the empirical evidence could not be collected because, in fact, no development has yet occurred, and so and further, there was some empirical evidence presented by another wildlife biologist at the public hearing, which showed that the existing construction laydown area that has been used close to the wildlife underpass currently has had a negative effect, and he did present some empirical evidence at the public hearing that night. So there is some concern that this technical memorandum does not address all of our concerns. So, should council wish to proceed with an appeal to the Municipal Government Board, Section 690 of the Municipal Government Act outlines that we have 30 days from the passing of the MD's bylaw to make such an appeal. That deadline is December 3rd. And so it would be our recommendation that we make that appeal. We need to outline in that appeal our reasons for why we believe the decision of the MD is detrimental to the concerns of the town of Canmore, and the reasons why mediation was not possible. The MGB, once they receive notice of that appeal, that would mean that the ASP that the MD has passed has been put in abeyance, and it would have no effect until the MGB provides a ruling on whether to dismiss the appeal or order the MD to amend or repeal the provision of their area structure plan. The MGB has 60 days to call an appeal or an alternate time which is mutually agreeable to all parties involved. So that is generally the outline of the process, and Ms. Hyde, if you could put up the draft motion for council's consideration. I can just read it out, that council approve the filing of an appeal to the Municipal Government Board in response to the MD of Bighorn's decision to approve the Dead Man's Flats area structure plan on the grounds that the ASP, if implemented, will have a detrimental effect on the functionality of critical wildlife corridor link between the Wind Valley Regional Habitat Patch and the Bow Flats Regional Habitat Patch that Canmore has worked to establish and maintain and forms part of the town's statutory plans. And I will leave that for you to consider.
So are there any questions at this time for Ms. Soto? Seeing none, thanks very much.
Thank you.
No further ado, I will put the motion on the table that we see on the overhead. And speaking to the motion, I have to say I'm very disappointed that the MD continues to suggest that they are confused, don't understand what it is the town was seeking to perhaps resolve in mediation. I think, as the CAO has indicated, we were very clear in both our written comments and verbal communication at the public hearing, and again at a lengthy intermunicipal committee meeting. So I'm disappointed that they would not mediate. And frankly, given the 20-some years of work that the town has put into defining the wildlife corridors and implementing the wildlife corridors, and the cost and the importance of wildlife underpass that was constructed between Wind Valley and the Dead Man's Flats area, and there's just too much importance attached to this work, and frankly, not only the town of Canmore, but landowners and citizens have put far too much energy into this issue to simply allow the functionality of the underpass to be threatened in this way. So I'll be happy to support this motion. Councillor Krautzer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll support this motion. I think that the town of Canmore has been consistent and clear throughout the years that a functional wildlife corridor system is integral to the health of the Bow Valley, and that we have been supportive of the MD in their efforts to keep that space undeveloped. I believe that their first position, which was to not develop that land, is the right position, and we've been consistently supportive of that. And this simply works to maintain what Dead Man's Flats was proceeding towards until very recently.
Further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. With that, I will move council go back in camera. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried unanimously.